He's not going to stay on my lap.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Bears Rebecca Fonte, and I am very excited to moderate this amazing screenwriting panel for SF Indie Fest. I've done this the last couple years in the art gallery lobby where we do the Bad Art Show. So it is, it is the new now and the new festival. So we are doing it virtually, but it has allowed us to meet up from all ends of the earth. We have a great panel today. I'm going to let them each sort of introduce themselves and what they've done. But let's start with our two winners of this year's screenwriting competition at SF Indie Fest. I'll start with you, Sarah Hallowell, and you won the short film competition. Will you tell us a little bit about you and about the film that won, so we all know to be on the lookout for it? Maybe it'll play next year if somebody makes it, or if you make it.
I can be as dangerous as that. My name's Sarah Hallowell, and I was born and bred in LA, and my story comes from my childhood in Los Angeles. And I had a very famous person who was living down the street from me, and he was quite elderly at the time. And I didn't really know who he was until he died. And then when I found out, it was quite something. And his name was Groucho Marx. And as a child, I was really into the Marx Brothers, and I didn't, when you look at Groucho on the screen as a 10-year-old girl, you see this sort of young, funny with a big mustache, and you don't realize that the guy down the street in a little beret smoking a cigar on his front stoop is the same person, especially because his real name is Julius. And so this story is sort of a little fairy tale about a little girl who meets up with her idol and doesn't know it. But anyway.
Wonderful. All right. And Isabel, you won the feature screenplay competition.
I'm in New York, but I was born and raised in San Francisco, and that was definitely what interested me about the contest. The feature's called Guts, and it's about a girl with pretty severe social anxiety and panic attacks who joins a sexual assault survivor group and meets her sort of like punk rock hero. And it takes place in Santa Cruz, and it's just all about the odd, quirky characters and like the Riot Girl scene there. And yeah.
Nice. I did see your cat's tail through the door behind you.
Oh, did you?
Yes. So he may make an appearance. My cat is already here. He is a very famous screenwriter amongst cats. Yeah. He actually did an uncredited pass on the musical Cats. And he is now very happy he was uncredited. All right. And then we also have with us Adrian Martinez and Talia, is it Lugassi?
Lugassi, that's right. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's start with you, Talia. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what people have probably seen of yours. I know I have seen it, so I'm very excited to get to talk to you about it.
Sure. I'm the writer-director of the feature film This Is Not a War Story, and that's the film that is premiering at SF Indie Fest. And it's a hybrid film about trauma and dealing with trauma and figuring out how to live through it and be a person and survive. And I made it with combat veterans. We collaborated together. So some of them appear in the film as themselves. The whole supporting cast are combat veterans. And there are fictional characters kind of woven into that as well. So it's a pretty wild ride. It took about 4 years to make the film, and I'm pretty stoked that it's here and done.
Awesome.
It's my second feature film. My first one was called Descent, and that was a Tribeca a couple 100,000 years ago, and starred Rosario Dawson and was a fairly controversial NC-17 movie.
You gotta love those NC-17s. We don't get enough of those anymore.
No, you don't.
All right. And then we've got Adrian Martinez, and you also have a film in the festival.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be a part of the festival. It's called I, Gilbert, and it's basically, I call it a future fairy tale about being seen. What that means is this guy, Gilbert, who I play in the movie, is basically completely incapable of connecting with people except through his phone. And he comes across a woman that just kind of like, you know, shakes his world, and now he has to choose between the digital life and the real one. And basically, it's an allegory for where we're at with our phones and obsessions with technology, and fake connection versus authentic connection is the overall theme that I hope people can become mindful of after they see the movie.
Nice. And have both the films like played online yet? Like with SF Indie Fest, can people go watch it tonight after this? Are they available?
No.
Okay, great. All right, so everybody knows what they're doing for the rest of the weekend. And then you're also, if you're a director, you're going to get inspired and you're going to want to make Sarah or Isabel's film. That's our goal for today. Oh, and also we should mention Adrian just wrapped a feature that he wrote.
Oh, you mean The Guilty?
Yeah.
No, I didn't write The Guilty. I just acted in it.
Oh, you acted in it. Okay. You
Yeah.
acted in it. Yes.
That's my day
With Jake
job.
Gyllenhaal. That's your day job.
Yeah,
But you acted in this one too. You acted in the film that's playing.
Yeah, I played
this week.
Gilbert, and I wrote, produced, starred, and directed, and I won't do that again. Not with my own money, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Let's
it
do
was the
that.
bear, but I'm glad it's behind me.
All right. Well, so let's. I like to talk a little bit about process, and I think everybody approaches screenwriting a different way, and it's interesting to compare that. We all have stories that are burning inside of us. So I like to think about, well, what is when you have that kernel of an idea, and you're like, all right, I'm going to sit down and write this story. What is the very first thing that you do as a writer to dive into the process of writing your story?
Changed a lot. I think I used to spend a lot of time just diving in and starting to write. And I've learned about things like this, which is a detailed outline. But I have to say, it's there's a reason why a lot of people, most people probably outline their screenplays before they do it. I mean, at least create the lily pads and then go in and write the scene and go in and write the scene. And that's sort of how I do it. And a throw up draft, usually like the first, like, bleh, just not caring what it sounds like, not worrying about crafting anything. And then the very last thing is the vacuum draft, where you go through and check like every little tiny thing.
How do you stop yourself from correcting yourself when you're doing a throw up draft?
You gotta just plow through, I think. I mean, or you'll never finish. I've had that happen where I keep going back and then I keep going back and keep going back, and it's like this, as opposed to like, at least that's me. What about you guys? How do you feel? Do you outline, or do you just go, or?
I feel like I come back to those. No, you go.
I think I'm a little bit of the opposite in that sense. I don't do a hell of a lot of outlining. I have the structure in my head. I know who the people are. I have the voices of the characters, and then I just start writing. And if it has the energy, the momentum to keep me going, I go with it. And if the energy dissipates, I abandon it and write something else.
The voices of the characters. How do you know that the voice is right? What do you craft in your mind to know, like, okay, I've got that voice?
When I can
What's
hear
the
it.
outline in your brain? Yeah.
When I'm writing, I'm listening. If I'm forcing it, then I'm making them talk, and it's bullshit. But if I can hear them talking and I'm just writing down what I hear, then it's real and I trust it, and it makes me laugh and it's surprising.
I would say that's true. Same as far as the characters, for sure.
Isabel, how about you? How do you start your process?
I probably just like talk about it way too much and annoy most of the people in my life who they're like, I don't want to hear about the screenplay that you haven't even written yet. But I have a really great, I feel like she's watching, I don't know, a really great screenwriting, I guess I would say coach who um, I work with. And then just like very, very beginning, I'll just have like a Google Doc and I'll just write down, it's really loose, like a quote I imagine, or a, you know, any sort of like tiny little scene, or just all these ideas that are, you know, not really strung together in any way. But I always just feel like, I remember someone once said like ideas are like butterflies and you have to like catch them before they like fly away. And so I definitely feel like I like having like a little sacred space where like it's just free to just be whatever comes into your head. And as I'm writing, I'll keep adding to that, and it'll just get longer and longer. And then sometimes I'll look back in it. Yeah.
Adrian, how about you? How do you start your
mean,
process?
For myself, I mean, inspiration is really everywhere, and you have to have a sensitive eye and ear and be willing to take it in. For I Gilbert, for example, I was just sitting on the subway in New York, and this beautiful woman was sitting opposite me, and then like this guy, he just showed up in the subway car, and he just like, walked up to her and just started like taking photos of her face, just right in front of her. And she was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" She got really upset, and he was just very, very cold and impassive, and he just got off the train on the next stop, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it and wondering like, who is this guy, and
Mm.
what has happened to him that he could be so dead inside and objectify people like this. And so I created a narrative around that, and out of a sense of uh, a plea in a way, because I have a young daughter, and I was just wondering like, who is she going to grow up and be with if this is what's available. So it became a cautionary tale, but just being open to the moment and seeing that and being compelled and not being able to step away from it was what motivated me to write the script.
Yeah. I want to remind everybody who's watching on Eventive, be sure if you've got questions for the writers or just questions in
Gotcha.
general that you want me to ask all of them, drop them into the chat box and they will reach us and I will pass them on. So continue, you know, you can do that anytime during this chat, but I'll definitely leave some time at the end if we don't, you know, if we don't get to all of them, we'll make sure we hit them at the end. All right, so I like the way Isabel was saying she told everybody her idea until they got tired of it. I'm curious what help they give you in terms of like, what do you get from that process? And then I want everybody also to let us know kind of how you let other people in on your plans, and if you at what stage you let them in.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like, I mean, since I'm an actor and then who started writing, I feel like so much of how I like process things is just like through talking about it and then see like kind of like watching people to see how they react. And I feel like I better understand something the more I say it out loud. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely like told people about my ideas that just maybe weren't the right people or don't get it, and their sort of like lack of enthusiasm can kind of like, there's definitely a phase where you can just be a little too overly sensitive, and I think it's taken me a while to figure out boundaries in terms of like when you share your work, when you don't, who you share your work with, you know.
Who's the least helpful person you've ever shared your work with?
Myself.
Such a
You
good.
know,
I mean, it's very honest.
I'm just very hard on myself, and I just sometimes I'll just obsess over one word or page, and it can be very stifling. But I write very slowly and very quickly. Like for I Gilbert, it took me like I was just for like a year. I was just thinking of images because film is all about images, and I kept thinking of images and I kept thinking of ideas, and then I had to give birth to the baby, and I wrote the rough draft in about 3 days, and then I took it to my friends in this writing group that I have here in New York, and it's led by Jose Rivera, who got an Oscar nom for The Motorcycle Diaries, and he does it for free out of his heart, and it was just a godsend because I had a chance to bring in sayings and just kind of workshop it a bit. But I think that's the key is to really be particular about who you show your script to and make sure they're informed and intelligent, because everyone has an opinion, and I just feel like when you're just giving birth to the baby, you're very vulnerable to criticism and this and that. But I took it to the group, and they were very supportive. And now Jose exec produced the movie. But it takes a village, and for me, writing is very difficult. And so once you just birth the baby, I just feel like you need support from smart places and people, and they're everywhere if you're willing to look.
I think a writer's group is really helpful, and I think community of, they don't have to be like minds, but certainly sensitive people who are like-minded in that sense. I mean, I was going to say, as piggybacking on what Isabel was talking about, I found that if I talk about it too much, that the energy just dissipates. And it's I had a wonderful actor friend who isn't with us anymore, but he used to say, build the bomb in the basement. And I was like, I get that. And you can have a few people in there maybe with you or let them in. But I think if you share things too soon because you're excited, or if you talk about it too much, there's an opportunity for people to judge you, like Adrian and Isabel were talking about. And I don't think, there's a lot of people out there who have different motivations, and they aren't always there to help, even if they love you.
That were always, what you just said reminds me of the Tom Waits spoken word piece. What's he building in there? You want to have that era of mystery so that when you bring out your product, you know, it's like, I always like to bring things out a little bit more fully formed. I never show people a first draft. I like to have something that I feel is pretty darn polished, because then I want really harsh criticism, because then I know they're criticizing something that's worth being criticized. Whereas if it's the first draft, then my first answer is always, well, it's just a first draft. I don't want that. I want it to be like just ready to rip apart. Talia, how about you? Who do you share your work with and when?
I'm extremely cautious about sharing it. I almost never do until I reach a point where I'm very specific about who I give it to, so that I can anticipate what I think they will think of it if I've done it the way I think I have. So if I get the reaction that I am anticipating, then I've done something correctly. And if I get a surprise, then I have to check back in. But I always give it to somebody that I feel like I can anticipate how they're going to feel or how they're going to respond, because that tells me something based on what I'm expecting. But I very rarely share it. You lose all the steam that you have to write it by blathering on about it. And hearing yourself talk about it to other people, if you do it wrong, can really just send a shudder right through you. It's just, I never found it to be helpful. And as far as groups go, I mean, there are times when I have a group of actors that I'm close to, and I really trust their opinions and their feelings about stuff more, but by just hearing them say the dialogue. But workshopping, I've never found to be very constructive. I feel like everybody in the room, I don't know, it's just my opinion, but I feel like a lot of people just like to hear themselves talk, and everybody's an expert, and it's not necessarily, they don't know what you're trying to do, you know? So even as Sarah was saying, even when they're trying to be helpful, it can really detract from, you know, the spirit of the thing.
I think it probably depends on the group too. I mean, I have been in 3 different writing groups, and they were all 3 of them were various levels of quality. And one group was amazing and ran for several years, but the thing that it was best about was that it forced us to have new pages every week. So there was a little guilt factor if you didn't, and then it's like, well, I thought you were supposed to be a writer. And I love that. I feel like when we're all in our own space, especially now during pandemic, how are we keeping ourselves, you know, on task? Let's talk about the thing that has to be at the center of everybody's script, which is your protagonist. I think if you're putting yourself in the script, you know you're going to play a role, Adrian. That definitely creates a certain issue. Did you, you know, when you saw that on the subway, did you have any idea about who would be the protagonist or how it might work? Did you have multiple versions? This is a question that Daniel Mark Miller, who's watching, asked, but I think it's a great way for us to talk into, what it's like to, form your script around a central point.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I start with character when I write, and I ask myself, like, what's like the worst thing that could happen to this character,
Mm.
and I try to fill in that blank uh, with that journey. Um, and so, yeah, in my movie, there's some pretty awful things that that happen, but how did he get there? And what specific things did he do and say that led him to getting to this predicament? And I think that's the key, is really being really detailed and specific about what is said and about what we see. Because at the end of the day, it's the uniqueness of the film that will make or break it. Um, so I started with character, and I started with, okay, who's in his life? What really matters to him?
Mhm.
What is the obstacle he has to get the love he needs? And you just keep building and layering, layering, layering. I mean, each line, each scene description should build the story and inform the story thematically, in terms of the narrative, in terms of movement, and in terms of the emotional life. And if it doesn't, just cut it.
Sarah, you were writing something from your past, so I'm assuming that your central character is basically some version of you. What was that like?
I hate to say it was actually made it a lot easier. um, because also I was looking back at myself many, many years ago. And I think I had a picture of myself at that age right in front of me. And I was kind of a latchkey kid. I was an only child. So I had, I spent a lot of time alone and by myself making things. And so I think I was able to just sort of reach back into that little person and remember those feelings at the time. And it's a sort of a more lighthearted piece. So it's not, it doesn't go into too much of the darkness, although there is some implied elder abuse, which I happened to find out that I was right about. I had these feelings like something was going on with him and his creepy young girlfriend. And she ended up being exactly what I thought she was as a child. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Isabel, for your story, did you spend a lot of time in the Riot Girl scene there in Santa Cruz? Was there some personal understanding building around the story?
I mean, I can't say that I personally spent time there. I think that growing in San Francisco and my grandparents live in Santa Cruz, you just have like such an amazing exposure, especially like in the 90s when I was growing up, to just weirdos and artists. And my dad is a musician and my mom is a painter, and I feel like I had no shortage of really fascinating, unusual characters to draw from, and that I kind of like wanted to make an ode to these like kind of outsider personalities. So and then the Riot Girl thing kind of just came from like missing some sort of like wild feminism that had at that time. So yeah, but I wish
So
I
with
had
all
been there.
so with all those ideas kind of moving around in your head, how do you distill it down into your protagonist character who's entering the world, and we're probably seeing it through her eyes?
Well, I definitely, because I'm an actor, and I feel like the way I started writing was basically because I was just so worried I was never going to get cast in anything, that I was like, well, I guess I have to just make a movie or write a movie for me. So I definitely have that in mind in terms of like what's something I would want to play or experience. And then I kind of let that go. And I don't know, I think I was just really interested in a character that goes through a very, very visual transformation of someone who's very anxious and shy and inward, and that who goes to sort of like the other extreme of this sort of like wild punk rock you know, she just kind of like goes through everything with abandon by the end. And I think that was just always kind of like the navigation, in terms of like what phase she's at in terms of like opening herself up.
Yeah. Talia, it sounds like your script is very different than everybody else's in terms of how you must have developed your characters if you're working on collaboration. Can you talk a little bit about the characters in your film and how you crafted them?
Sure. I mean, originally it was a two-hander, and the characters I was writing were both two sides of my dealing with my own trauma. At first I didn't know that these characters were veterans. I was just listening to them and writing down what I heard, and I kind of was pulling on the threads and discovered who I thought that they were. And then I got in touch with veterans and read their work, and I said I kept repeating this refrain that I felt like I didn't have the right to tell the story. And they said, on the contrary, it was actually essential that somebody who is a civilian who feels such a connection to these traumatic experiences from my own point of view should try to create that bridge and try to tell that story and do it in this collaborative way. So it came together really sort of organically, with them kind of encouraging me along the way with it. But the character that I wrote that I ended up playing was a side of me, but I didn't necessarily know I was going to play that part. It all came about from writing. I was writing for an actor, Will Patton, and he and I were reading these scenes together. And I said, Will, at some point I'm going to get somebody else in here and she'll do this. And he's like, no, you are this, clearly this person. And so it was sort of, I don't know, I had to sort of be encouraged along with it, but it was in combination with, you know, what I was bringing to it on a personal level as an actor. And that was informing my process to write, and then in turn informing the creation of these hybrid characters. So I'm not explaining it very well, but it's almost like it's hard to go backwards and pull the threads and figure out where they all started. But that's a general picture of it.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating. So you said that it started as a two-hander with basically two sides of your take on something. Did you ever consider playing the other part before you fine-tuned it?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it always, yeah. So how did you make the decision as to which one you would end up reading?
It was really a matter of being more honest with the fact that I just decided I had to play the person who just didn't have anything fucking figured out, was really wrestling with all the shit. And it was part of the experience of getting all of that stuff out that I knew was the acting energy behind it, that's where I was at, and that's what had to happen. So, yeah.
So when you are all writing, do you ever go look back to other screenplays that have inspired you in your process in the past and draw from it, or do you try to avoid things?
I recently, I do read the screenplay for Taxi Driver by Paul Schrader. It's just so wonderfully written. I mean, the stage descriptions, the dialogue. I mean, we all seen the movie, but just in terms of the pure art of writing this screenplay, I mean, it takes my breath away how good it is. So I just kind of read that to remind myself that greatness is possible and that this is the goal. And even if I don't reach it, at least I can shoot for this. But for me, that screenplay is a big deal.
So Bears, did you mean our own screenplays from the past or other screenplays? Because
no, not your own screenplays from your past, because that's just going to make you feel bad. Right. Well, actually, it might make you feel good, because like, look how much better I am now. Yeah.
But I agree with Adrian. I think reading other screenplays, especially screenplays that have reached people deeply, can be helpful. Are
there any ones that really inspire you and that you love, Sarah?
Believe it or not, Shakespeare in Love. I have to say,
it's a beautiful, beautiful screenplay. Beautiful. Yeah.
I think the writing in it. I write a lot of period stuff, so I was very interested to see how that would be attacked, but yet for an audience now. I find it interesting that everybody here was an actor or is an actor, and I think writing characters, if you're an actor, you're writing for actors, so you know
Mhm.
what you're going to want and what you're going to have to sort of chase. I wondered if everybody
Mhm.
else sort of felt that way.
It's funny. I think like most people who are writers are somehow, they were actors probably at some point in their life, because you're usually not a writer unless you like did theater in high school or something. And I mean, those are the creative people. Like, I'm not an actor, but I certainly acted in the past. I would never act in anything now,
Yeah.
but I can, you still hear things as an actor when you're working on your process. You can't not hear text that way. And even if you're not an actor, you probably could be an actor. It's interesting. How about, yeah, Talia, how about from you? Are there any scripts?
Being an actor.
Oh, I spent years immersed in Schrader and Taxi Driver. That was next to my bed for years. But I also go back to Network, Chayefsky's Network. That's a brilliant one. You can dive in that one.
Totally.
Yeah. Mm.
Isabel?
Oh, sorry. Can you see me? I was like, it was telling me I was losing connection. I'm good.
No, you're fine. You're good. And now you froze. No.
Yeah, I think that like, oh, okay.
Can't tell.
Mm.
Yeah, I think she's frozen.
She's acting frozen.
Wouldn't it be great if that'd be like a thing?
Back?
You're back.
You're back. You're fine now.
Whew.
The plane
Zoom.
that was flying directly overhead of your apartment is gone, so you're okay.
These
know.
Zoom stuff stress me out so much because I'm just like so bad with technology on the spot, especially.
Well, especially
What
when
was
there's
the
no
question?
connection to it. Like to me,
Yeah.
it's like, it reminds me of like television. I'm like, oh, I want to fix the antennas. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's not how it works anymore. There's nothing. We were talking about scripts that you return to for inspiration or that you feel have influenced your writing.
I mean, I don't know, like I'm a new screenwriter, so I feel like we're talking, like as if I've been doing it for so long, but I don't love reading screenplays. I think that I have to force myself to do it, even if it's a screenplay I really love. It's one of those things that it feels so separate from the end product that I always have a really hard time. Like I don't know. I just find that whole process to be really frustrating. But I do like, I definitely read like Lady Bird and scripts that I would look for scripts to like get permission to like use certain descriptions or words, or I think I can be pretty tentative and not, I'm like, oh, am I allowed to do that, or am I allowed to write this, and looking at scripts and seeing what they did and how they describe things kind of gave me permission to do that.
Yeah, cool. All right, so when you are in the middle of writing, what is the thing that often most gets you off track? What is the wall that you find yourself slamming into that you then have found a way to defeat? I know that everybody watching probably has their own particular things that they run into. So I would love to know, what are some roadblocks that you've encountered and how you've overcome them, in case people have come across similar things or can just be inspired by it.
I just think that like naturally I think a lot of writers just like write very inactive characters. I think that having a character that is continually fighting for something and you can see the visual representation of them fighting for something is one of those things that sounds very simple. And I always feel like I have a really hard time with that. And I pay a woman to keep me on course and make sure that I'm actually doing my homework and doing the hard work of structure. I would say structure is very hard. And I get really, really frustrated when I'm like mapping something out in structure.
I think for me, when I'm writing something, especially if I love the subject, or I love the thing itself. And right now I'm writing something that's so encompassing that it's almost like it's set in 1912 New York right now, and then it'll be going somewhere else. But I've been studying like subway maps and restaurants and what Brooklyn looked like and which part of Brooklyn and Williamsburg and a specific high school in Williamsburg from then, and what were they wearing and what did the subways look like, and if somebody needs to reach somebody, was there a telephone? Did they have a telephone? Did they have enough money? So you get very, like, at least I get very insular, and I feel like I'm in my office a lot and I love it. And I honestly, I feel like I go away and then when I sort of come out at dinner time, it's kind of a bummer a little bit. So I feel like I like to stay in the story, sort of like an actor staying in character as much as possible, like as much as possible. And I feel like the work comes out faster and it's not polluted. And I also keep a little thing by my bed, because sometimes, I'm sure all of you guys have this happen, where those little hours just before you're falling asleep or just as you're waking up in the middle of the night, you wake up and it's like, oh my God. And it's like the butterflies, Isabel, you talk about, and you have to write it down. And so many times I wake up in the morning and I'm like, thank God I wrote that down, and then bring it back into the room and start inputting it into the thing. So that's me.
I dreamt an entire screenplay one night. Like an entire screenplay,
Really?
3-act structure, several characters, everything developed. I got up and I immediately like outlined it.
You're a very productive sleeper.
I've never achieved that a second time, but it was, I've dreamt opening scenes since then, but never like full structure with themes. It was like a gift. If I believed in God, I would believe that it was a gift from the heavens, but I don't. So instead, I just feel like I'm really lucky.
Still a gift.
Still a gift. Adrian, how about any roadblocks that you've hit on a regular basis and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, as I said, but I just stayed a long time before actually purging out the script. So it goes pretty hot and heavy once I settle down and write. But a warning sign for me is when I write cliche or when I write stereotype, that means it's not going to work. And so what saves me at that point is research. I mean, in my movie, there's a character who has PTSD, of which I knew nothing. And so I actually spoke to people that deal with it, even to this very day, and have experienced it. And the things they said, and I sort of adjusted to my movie and included in the movie. So research is very helpful because it gives you the details you're going to need to survive the script.
I agree with that, 100%.
Yeah. Talia, do you want to chime in or?
Sure. I mean, I feel similar to Adrian about the research part, but I'm thinking through how would my answer sound out loud. I think it'll sound ridiculous, but the only real block that I experience writing is the same block that I experience doing anything in life. I'm doing something and then I stop because I think, what's the fucking point? Just an existential block, and it just happens and it sucks. And at that point, if I'm writing something and I have the energy to do it, I will at that point take it to an actor or a couple of actors. And I'll just say, I don't know where I'm at. Let's just read this. And something will happen because we're physicalizing it. And then I can go back and do whatever, but I can keep going. I usually have to, at that point, become physical. I've got to do some, if I can't find actors to read with, obviously I can't do that during the pandemic, but I would normally do that. It's usually up to my dog to save me. I'll just run around with him or punch a bag or something, become physical, and then I can get past the existential.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said what's the point, it's all I could think about was like the last year. The last time I actually like left the state of Texas was last year's San Francisco Indie Fest. Normally, I'm a programmer and I program the late night, midnight stuff for Jeff, and that was literally the last time I left the state of Texas was for this festival last year. It's been very hard to like stay focused on like getting work done. How have you guys found the pandemic has affected your writing? Are you getting stuff done, and how are you able to do that? I guess any tips for people, because I think we've got at least 3 or 4 months left of this before everybody gets a vaccination in their arm.
Well, sadly, this was my life before the pandemic. Like I never go out. I'm not like a social person, and but I have basically just I do my best to stay focused. I write every day, and even if it's just like half a page, you know, it's important to keep the muscle finely tuned and just show up creatively, and show up and just keep moving creatively, because it's very easy to do nothing. Like they say, an object inert stays inert, and all this. And I'm a scorpion, and I have a scorpion stinger, and that will curl into myself and sting me and mess me up, and I don't want that happening. So I try to really show up creatively every day, and that could be writing, or it could be like, well, it used to be like just going to a museum and going to the 5th floor at MoMA and watching all the greats do their thing and just taking it in. It could be a creative walk and just kind of like taking the world in and writing something down that inspires you. But yeah, the discipline of writing needs to be there every day for me.
I think showing up, suiting up, even if you write a few lines or do a little bit of research, just a little something every day. A friend of mine was married to a really famous playwright, and he used to write 3 pages a day. No matter what, 3 pages a day. He just made himself do it. And even if he wanted to go further, still 3 pages a day. And by the end of however many days, 30, he had a rough draft. It might not be perfect, but at least he had it. And I'm taking a sort of a pilot writing class right now, and we're on week 4. And I have acts, teaser, act 1, act 2, done, now started at 3. And I think that kind of structure works for me, because if not, sometimes I'll just get lost and procrastinate and organize things, and you know.
Yeah. I love structure. I'll say I'm a slave to structure. My favorite book of all time, and this includes books that I read for pleasure, and that's how sad and how much I love structure, is Save the Cat. It's literally my favorite book. It's Save the Cat, right? Yeah. And then like various Dr. Seuss books. I mean, those are like my favorites of all time that I go back to for inspiration. But whenever I have an idea, I won't allow myself to do any writing until I break it down into beats. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, well, look, I can ruin those beats later when I get into it. But I want to have those beats, mm-hmm. because I have too many times I've started a script and gotten 2/3 of the way through it. And then, you know, the kernel of the excitement of the idea will carry you through to having to like tie it up. But once you have to do the hard work of tying shit up, if you didn't do the structure work, I always feel like it falls apart. So for me, my main activity during pandemic, because I haven't been able to be in a good headspace for writing creatively, has been to structure scripts that I'm working on, that are gestating in my brain. I think I'm like Adrian in that I have 3 or 4 projects that I'm going to write, and I want to be ready to write them. And when I'm ready, I'll know when I'm ready when the outline is great. So how do you know when the script is done?
Just gonna say, Talia said something that I thought was really smart, which was she knows the end. I think if you know the beginning and you know the end, I think that's like the most important thing. As far as that. Now continue, sorry, you meant.
I don't remember saying that. I don't often know the ending. I think I was kidding earlier when I said, I know when it's done when I just can't fucking do anymore. Like, it's just done. Like when you hit that point of saturation where you're like, I have done this, I have heard this, and it's like an internal thing that just goes off and you're like, I know it's done. You know what I mean? But it's interesting to point at that aspect of the ending part and knowing it or not, because for me, I think it's kind of important not to quite know until you're there. It's okay to have a sense of where you want to go, but if you're not open to multiple possibilities, it's going to be very boring as you just zero in on it, in my experience. And I think that unless you are like open to whatever the possibilities may be, maybe my characters need to do this, allow them to surprise me. If I don't do that, I'm steering them. And there's something to me in my experience of writing it that feels a little bit forced and untruthful. And I think the prescription of having an ending is actually fighting against the writing. And in my experience of doing it, that's how I've experienced it. But yeah, I hit a saturation point and I know I'm done. That's, that's how it plays out.
I keep screwing with it until they tear it out of my hands.
That too.
I can rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And rewrite
It's
forever.
never done. It's never done. If I were to make This Is Not a War Story now, I would be writing different scenes. I would be doing it a different way. I'm a different person now, and we all are after our projects, certainly.
Do you ever rewrite on set? Like, do you ever have a moment where it's like something doesn't work and you just have to fix it, or no?
Rarely. I try to root that in the rehearsal process as much as possible. So if I am making changes in that regard, I want to do it before the camera and the crew are there.
But there's also the approach of like the screenplay is basically the newspaper. It changes every day. I mean, Coppola said that, not me. Yeah. And you should be open to the miracles on set. Like if an actor comes up with an inspired line, might be foolish not to use it.
I built improvisational pieces into the script. Weirdly, I was like, this is a point in the scene where we'll riff on this, and I didn't know if it was going to work or not. But as Adrian's saying, like that's the magic you're trying to capture and plan for. It's crucial.
Yeah, like Dustin Hoffman in Midnight Cowboy when he slams his hands on the cab. I'm walking here. Like that was improvised. The guy ran through the PA who was trying to stop him, and that's just gold. And so yeah, you keep it.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, Adrian, because you've done a lot of stage work, and when you are on stage, the script is sacrosanct. You can't change it, right? And so like I know for me, I like when I direct something in film, I like try to pretend like the writer is a different person when I'm on set, because I'll be like, well, I don't understand what the writer was doing here, so let's try to break it apart, like help me with this. And I like bring the actor in, and the actor would be like, oh, can I change this line? I'll be like, I don't know, the writer's not here to like rewrite this and get permission, so we have to film what's in the script. But I think that's really interesting that you're talking about changing things, because when you're doing stage plays, you can't make changes, even if it's a world premiere of a script. That's not your job to make suggestions.
Yeah, I mean the stage is its own thing. I don't see it as the same thing as movies. So the stage has its own set of rules. It's all about language. Movies are all about images. And to me, like my movie, it kind of feels like a dream, and it basically was just a lot of images that just kept coming my way. But to your question earlier, I think the real key is also not to lose sight that it's okay to be ambiguous at the end. Like I don't feel this pressure to tidy everything up to something we can all understand. I love ambiguity in movies. I'm drawn to it. And I feel like that's really important to allow yourself, when you end your story, if you don't have every answer, cut yourself some slack with the writing and realize, as in life, we don't sometimes know the answers, and that's okay.
I'm curious, you're all in different stages of your career, but you all just finished a project. So what is something that from the last script you just wrote that you feel like you got better at during that script? What did you learn yourself?
Well, this was just like my first whack at like a feature, so I definitely feel like.
Oh, and you won a competition. Okay, great. Everybody's watching now is like,
I did.
go to hell, Isabel. Yeah, okay.
I mean, I had a lot of help, and I've written plays. Like it's not like this is like the first time I like picked up a pencil or whatever, but like, yeah, I feel like I just learned. I mean, I agree with Adrian, like coming from writing plays, I had a lot of, ideas for scenes that were 10 pages long that people were like, scenes are not 10 pages, Isabel. And I think that, yeah, I think it took me a long time to understand film and the visual and the storytelling of the visual. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I learned everything.
For me, value of structure and doing an outline. It was just a lot more efficient for me, because I sort of, sometimes if I have a beginning and an end, then I can run through it any way I want. And yes, if you get to the end and you want to change it, of course you change it. Or if you end up in another place, but it's nice to sort of have a plan A, and an outline can give you that. And then if you choose to depart, then you do. I mean, I've had certain characters that didn't work, or others that became much bigger. But at least I sort of had an idea of where to go. And every day when I came to sit down, I sort of had an idea of where I wanted to go next. And it's not always linear, sometimes it's, but the outlining, it helps. I have to say, I hate to admit it, because I resisted it for a really, really, really long time.
So did I, and now I feel like those were years of my life wasted.
I mean, I kept in mind this time the macro and the micro. Like when you write a screenplay, you got to keep in mind the macro, like the general themes of things, and you have to keep in mind the micro, which is the very specific details of each scene and of each character and what makes them unique. So that dance between the macro and the micro, which for me has to exist on every page, I got better at that. I trusted it more at the end than I did at the beginning, and just something I try to apply now on my next script that I'm writing now is, really embracing the macro and the micro, and understand that one feeds the other.
Yeah.
I think I learned a lot about the relationship between behavior and dialogue, and things that I sort of thought that I knew that I ended up discovering. I mean, so much of dialogue works so well when it's contradictory to the behavior or reveals something. So I let myself have as much fun with that as I possibly could, and I feel like it's paid off. A lot of that stuff is in the film, and I'm happy with it. And it's changing the way I write.
Awesome. All right, well, we only have a few more minutes. I want to thank you guys all for sharing so much about your process. I've learned a lot. I'm inspired. I want to get back to my script that I've just been structuring for the last 11 months. If you feel comfortable sharing what the next thing is you're working on, if it's not giving up, the secrets of your inspiration, I'm curious what the next project is you're going to write or want to write, or even if you want to speak about it in very nebulous sense without revealing anything.
I'm not sure that I can.
Yeah, see, it's a group of screenwriters. They're like, no, my cards are all in here. Nobody's gonna share. I love it.
They're little. I mean, it's a turn of the century love story, limited dramatic series. That's about all. I'm based on a true story.
It's funny because you talk to directors and they always know the next 3 projects they're working on, even if they don't have the scripts yet. They're like, well, I'm going to do a Western, and then I'm going to do it doesn't even matter. It's just like, it's tracked out. It's screenwriters are like, no. It's all poker. All right. Well, no, please, if you're going to share, I'm not going to stop you because we want to be inspired.
You know, I like to talk about my new ideas. So this is, I just.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're the one. Try it out on us.
I'm writing about a young girl in the South who falls in love with a cult leader and joins a cult. Yeah.
Nice. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being a part of SF Indie Fest, Adrian and Talia, for letting us screen your films.
Thank you.
Everybody, be sure to check out I, Gilbert, and what's the name of your film? This Is Not a War Story. Yeah. They are screening as part of the festival, and be on the lookout for Sarah and Isabel's film, in the future, or their next projects. And it's great, even though I was not able to be in San Francisco right now. It was great to have a connection to all you people back in my second home. Thank you guys for watching, and enjoy the festival.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye, you guys.